The truth about $30 survival knives. We tested 5. Hook. If you're shopping for a survival knife on a budget, here's the problem: the market is full of hype, inflated prices, and gear marketing that makes people think they need to spend big to get something dependable. But in a practical field test, one $25 hardware store knife held up through baton work while an $80 premium style option failed hard. In this video, we're cutting through the branding and looking at what actually matters when you need a cheap survival knife that works. Intro. Welcome back to the Mountain Home channel. This one is for the budget-conscious prepper, the beginner who needs one dependable blade, and the person who is tired of being told that preparedness only works if you buy the expensive version. Today we're talking about budget survival knives, what holds up, what fails, what features are actually worth paying for, and why a cheaper knife can sometimes outperform a more expensive one in the kind of rough utility work that matters in the real world. Now, this is not a collector video. It's not a steel snob lecture. And it's not about buying the most aggressive-looking blade on the shelf. This is about practical value. If you want a knife for basic preparedness tasks like cutting cordage, food prep, shaving tinder, light wood processing, emergency utility work, and general camp use, the real question is not which knife looks coolest. The real question is which one gives you the most function for the money. Challenge. The challenge with survival knives is that most buyers start in the wrong place. They start with branding, style, and fear. They see tactical marketing. They see dramatic product photos. They hear claims about elite use cases that have nothing to do with how they'll actually use the knife. And before long they're convinced that if a blade doesn't cost real money, it must be junk. But for most normal users, the survival knife roll is much simpler. You need something strong enough for hard use, comfortable enough to work with, easy enough to maintain, and cheap enough that buying it doesn't damage the rest of your preparedness budget. That matters because a knife is just one part of a system. If you overspend on a blade, that is money not going into water, food, lighting, medical supplies, fuel, batteries, tools, or training. And in preparedness, one overpriced item can quietly weaken the rest of your plan. Mistake. The biggest mistake people make is paying for image before they pay for function. A lot of expensive knives sell identity more than utility. They're marketed like status items. Big names. Exotic coatings. Dramatic design language. Fancy sheaths. Premium packaging. But once you get past the brand story, what actually matters comes down to a short list of practical questions. Can it take abuse without catastrophic failure? Can it cut efficiently? Is the handle usable when wet, cold, or tired hands are involved? Can you sharpen it without specialized equipment? Is the sheath safe and practical? And does the price make sense for the performance you're getting? That's why budget testing matters. Sometimes an inexpensive knife is cheaply made and should be avoided. But sometimes a plain, durable, workmanlike blade punches far above its price class because it was built around simple utility instead of hype. Lesson: what we looked for. So what should you actually look for in a cheap survival knife? First, blade strength. The knife does not need to be indestructible, but it does need to handle realistic stress. That means general cutting, scraping, carving, and light baton style wood processing without becoming unsafe. Second, edge geometry. A blade can be expensive and still cut poorly if the grind is thick or awkward. A cheaper knife with a sensible edge profile can outperform it in normal work because it actually slices and carves efficiently. Third, handle comfort. This gets ignored far too often. A knife that hurts your hand after 10 minutes of work is not a good field tool. Hot spots, slick scales, poor contouring, and bad grip texture show up fast when you use a knife hard. Fourth, steel practicality. Most people obsess over steel far beyond what their use case requires. For a budget survival knife, easy sharpening and decent toughness often matter more than chasing prestige steel names. Fifth, sheath quality. A good knife with a bad sheath becomes annoying or unsafe. Retention matters. Carry comfort matters. Simplicity matters. And sixth, price discipline. A cheap knife only makes sense if it frees up money for the rest of your setup while still covering the jobs you actually need it to do. The 5-knife test mindset. When you compare a group of cheap survival knives, what you usually discover is that performance spreads out fast. Some fail because they are too soft. Some fail because the handles are awful. Some fail because the blade geometry is all wrong. And some surprise you because they are boring in the best possible way. That's where the most interesting result came from here. The inexpensive hardware store blade survived the kind of rough baton-style task that exposed a more expensive premium branded option. That does not mean every cheap knife is great. And it does not mean every expensive knife is bad. It means the price tag alone is a terrible decision-making tool. Preparedness buyers need to hear that. Because too many people assume more expensive automatically means more dependable. It doesn't. Application: how to judge a knife before you buy. Let's make this practical. If you are shopping for a budget survival knife, here is how to think. Start with the use case. Are you really looking for a one-knife emergency tool for vehicle storage, bug-out gear, camp utility, and home backup? Or are you mostly looking for a general outdoor knife? A lot of people buy oversized blades because they think bigger means more survival. In reality, a moderate, sturdy fixed blade is usually more useful than an oversized fantasy knife. Next, look at construction. Does the knife appear to be built around straightforward durability, or is it built around styling? A simple, solid design often wins. Then think about maintenance. If the edge rolls or dulls under work, can you bring it back easily? In a real-world preparedness setting, ease of sharpening matters. Then think about control. Can you choke up on it for finer tasks? Can you use it for food prep, carving, and utility work without fighting the design? Then think about the sheath. A knife you don't want to carry usually gets left behind. And finally, think about replacement logic. A budget preparedness knife should be something you can use without fear, maintain without stress, and replace without wrecking your budget if it gets lost, damaged, or loaned out. Where cheap knives fail. Now let's be fair. Cheap knives do fail in predictable ways. Some use poor heat treatment and lose their edge too quickly. Some have handles that become miserable under pressure. Some have weak sheaths with bad retention. Some are too thick behind the edge and cut like wedges. And some are designed to look rugged while cutting corners on the details that matter. That is why budget does not mean random. It means selective. You still need standards. You still need to avoid junk. The goal is not to spend as little as possible. The goal is to spend intelligently. Why the hardware store knife result matters. The reason the cheaper hardware store result matters so much is because it forces the right lesson. The right lesson is not always buy the cheapest knife. The right lesson is stop assuming branding predicts field performance. If a simple, practical blade gets the job done, holds together, sharpens easily, and rides in a workable sheath, it may be a better preparedness purchase than a higher-priced option that spends more effort looking serious than being serious. This is especially important for beginners. A lot of new preppers make one of two mistakes. They either buy junk because it is cheap, or they overspend because they are afraid cheap must be junk. The sweet spot is in the middle, practical value. What I would prioritize. If I were choosing a budget survival knife for a normal preparedness setup, I would prioritize it in this order. Dependable fixed blade construction. Comfortable handle under real use. Useful edge shape for general tasks. Easy sharpening. Safe, practical sheath. Reasonable price. Everything after that is secondary. Cool coatings are secondary. Brand mythology is secondary. Extreme styling is secondary. And a lot of survival marketing is secondary. What matters is whether the knife works when the work gets ugly. Realistic expectations. Also keep realistic expectations. A budget survival knife is not a miracle tool. It won't replace a saw, an axe, proper food prep tools, or a full camp kit. But a good one can cover a lot of small and medium tasks reliably, and that makes it valuable. Preparedness is usually not about one heroic piece of gear. It is about having enough practical gear that works together. A dependable, affordable knife fits that mindset perfectly. Conclusion. So what's the truth about $30 survival knives? Some are junk. Some are better than they have any right to be. And the only thing more dangerous than buying too cheap is buying based on hype instead of function. The biggest takeaway from this comparison is simple: do not let price or branding do your thinking for you. Look for strength, comfort, maintainability, sheath quality, and practical utility. A plain, honest knife that performs is worth far more in preparedness than an expensive blade that sells fantasy. If you keep your standards high and your ego out of the purchase, you can put together a much smarter gear setup for the same money. CTA. Prepare for anything. Visit https://preparedpathways.com for expert tips, guides, and resources to build your emergency food supply today. Get your emergency survival kit here. https://shorturl.it/1lnpr. If you want more practical preparedness reviews that focus on what actually works for normal people on real budgets, stay with the Mountain Home channel.